what a crazy weekend it was in Russian politics. I mean, we woke up Saturday morning with the news that this rebel army, the Wagner army, was marching on Moscow. Now, if you're not up to speed on what's happened, the leader of that mercenary network, known as the Wagner Group, had been fighting Ukraine for the Russian army. The US estimates last year that they was 50,000 strong, maybe more. And we saw General Jack Keane on with Andrew Bolt talking about this. 40,000 of those 50,000 are Russian criminals, because the Wagner leader went around the remote parts of Russia recruiting people out of jails, murderers and rapists. Their leader decided he is sick of Putin's leadership, and he's marched his troops on Saturday toward Moscow. He's now stood them down and ordered them to return to Ukraine. But we came very, very close to some sort of civil war, I thought, at the weekend in the nuclear nation of Russia. As for the leader himself, Prigozhin, he's now in Belarus after making a deal with Putin. But as James Clapper, the American former director of the National Intelligence, said, it's all a little bit strange.
Maybe I spent too much time in intelligence, but this whole thing, this deal to me is kind of fishy. That all of a sudden, Prigozhin stopped, turned left or turned back, and then he's going to go to, agreed to go of all places, Belarus, which is essentially, from a security standpoint, an extension of Russia. This is an unanswered question, obviously, and hopefully as we learn more, we'll find out just what happened. But on its face, it's a little fishy to me.
So no civil war, but what does that all mean for Russia, Putin's leadership and the war in Ukraine? Joining me now is Michael Shoebridge from Strategic Analysis Australia. What did you make of this, Michael, when you woke up Saturday morning hearing that the Wagner army was about to march on Moscow?
Well, Steve, I initially thought Wagner's forces just aren't big enough to do anything that might even start to look like it threatens Putin. But we just saw another example that Vladimir Putin hasn't controlled events since he started his war against Ukraine back in February last year. There is no day he's been in control of events since then. I don't think Vladimir Putin or anyone else in Russia really knew which way this was going to go. The key thing that stopped Prigozhin from a successful march on Moscow is it turned out that none of the key Russian military units or commanders or governors actively supported him. But the thing that's got to have really disturbed Putin is all the Russian forces on that road to Moscow and in that city of Rostov that Wagner forces captured stood by and let the Wagner forces do what they wanted to do. That's the bigger bad news for Putin here.
So if we go all the way back to the start of this conflict in Ukraine, of course, Vladimir Putin refused to call it a war. He started calling it a military operation. It was going to all be over in 2 or 3 days. And he didn't really, did he, Michael, want to go back to the Russian people and use conscription to build up the numbers of his troops on the ground. And this is how this Wagner outfit managed to get their power, it seems to me.
Exactly. He filled the failures in the Russian military with this mercenary outfit. And, you know, James Clapper's right, it was a bunch of prisoners. Prigozhin, their commander, promised them their freedom if they fought in Ukraine. They were quite effective. They were really ruthless, bloody fighters around Bakhmut. And so they really strengthened the Russian campaign in Ukraine. Not enough to prevail, but they were a big part of the effort. So to have them turn against the Russian state and really a turn on the Russian military leadership that Prigozhin condemned and wanted executed, that was extraordinary. And it just shows Putin doesn't have a state as we'd understand it. He's got a bunch of kind of empowered warlords and thugs around him, and this one went bad.